Welcome back to part 4 of our 5-part series on UCL tears. This one we're going to talk about exercise. I'm Max Wardell, overheadathletics.com. Charles Donovan, back with part 4 here. When we talk about UCL exercise, we really have to condition the entire body. Make sure we're taking up muscle slack through the core, utilizing co-contractions. We're strong in the core musculature, strong in the gluteal, all this good stuff. Make sure the shoulder and the rotator cuff is really strong. We've done a lot of videos on those things in the past. You want to go check those out. In this video, we're going to talk specifically about elbow-based exercise, really the forearm and the tricep, because those are the most important ones in actually stabilizing the medial elbow. So you have to be really strong through your forearm musculature. If you haven't checked out the first 3 installments of this 5-part program here, you want to go check those out. The UCL, remember the ulnar collateral ligament, the Tommy John ligament, the most important component is the anterior bundle, moving from the medial epicondyle to the sublime tubercle right here. That's the most important component of the UCL for our throwing athletes, and it becomes injured as you take somebody outside 90 degrees of flexion, out into 70 degrees of flexion, a little bit of supination. We need to avoid this position when we throw, and we'll talk about that in part 5. But we need to make sure we avoid it in our exercise. So avoiding this outward bending stress, which is valgus stress, is really important, because if you remember back to video 2, that's how we start to assess the ulnar collateral ligament's integrity. So we need to make sure the shoulder is strong, the entire body is strong, but we're not going to cover that in this video. We want to talk about the tricep, because if you remember back to our assessment video, as well as our manual therapy video in part 3, there is actually a bifurcation of the tricep tendons as they come in and insert into the elbow, one on either side. And the ones that come on the medial side can often become a little bit damaged as a result of chronic inflammation, cytokine storm in that area. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on triceps, which often becomes weak in our throwing athletes, and we're going to work on the eccentric component, because that's really what the tricep does as it controls the arm during the throw. So we're going to go into a tricep extension, and we're going to start to work on the pronator teres, that big pronator teres muscle in the forearm as well. So Chuck's in a lunge stance where he's going to straighten this back leg. He's in a position approximating the throw. Now, he's going to keep the elbow up at shoulder height, which is really important once we actually look at the throwing motion. He's going to let the elbow bend in towards the ear. The elbow stays up. And then he's going to work on extending the elbow, turning the thumb under as he does so. So we're getting a little bit of shoulder control. We're working quite a bit on that tricep, that pronator teres. He's going to get a nice little eccentric hold and then eccentrically control it back in. Now, if somebody has triceps tendonitis, triceps tendinosis, we can also assist them with this exercise. Find a weight that they can easily, or I shouldn't say easily, but comfortably bring back, and we can actually give them that little extra force and let them eccentrically control it back in. And out. However, I like to have my athletes be as autonomous as possible, because he has to have strategies that he can use at home. So let's go into that again. I want a little more pronation. So we're starting to work on that pronator teres. First step is right here. Now, if you look at the attachment, it's actually pulling over towards his right shoulder, which, if you think about that, pulls him into an inward bending force, which is varus. If the band was pulled or the attachment was pulled this way, it would pull him out, which is valgus. So what we're going to have Chuck do in later stages of rehabilitation, come on back in, hold right there. Now you're going to turn your body so you're facing at an angle that way, Chuck. So now Chuck has this attachment. It's actually pulling his elbow out a little bit. That's the stress that can damage the UCL, but we want to develop lines of tension and strength in that exact pattern. So we start to apply more valgus as he gets stronger. Turn that thumb under. That also forces him to work that pronator teres hard, because the moment arm of this cable column has more intensity or is greater in magnitude in the realm of pronation, or in that rotatory force there. So it makes him work harder in the forearm, maybe a little less in the tricep, but also is teaching his forearm to start to stabilize that medial elbow. Once we've done that, we can go in, Chuck. Now we're going to move over to the other side. We've got a lot of weight here, so the cable column's not moving. We're going to start to move into some of our forearm strengthening. I like to take a baseball, It's actually an NAI baseball here. We're both NAI guys. So Chuck played at Indiana Tech before he played professionally. I played at Concordia University in Ann Arbor. So we're in the same conference. Didn't play against each other, but then we're going to go here. So we rolled the ball in the band. So the band rolls, 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 rolls. I grab my fastball grip or whatever pitch grip I want to do, and then I'm going to actually do my forearm strengthening. So let's have Chuck go into that. Make sure the band is rolled over the top. If you're going to do flexion, you want it to resist you into flexion. If you're going to do a pronation, you want it to resist you into pronation. So let's go ahead and grab that one, Chuck. We can have him work on single leg stability here. So why don't we have you do single leg stability up in one leg? Now, we've got a lot of valgus here. If I don't want that, I just have him turn this way. So now the band's pulling him straight back. He gets his elbow out in front. The band's pulling him into flexion as opposed to valgus when we manage the load. I like to train guys into elbow flexion to start because it's something they're not accustomed to. Now you can do isometrics here, or we can start to do, go ahead, flexion and extension, working on the anterior component, the finger flexors, forearm flexors. And we're working on single leg balance. Get that knee up there for me. Working on lateral hip stability, core stability. We can do all these things at the same time, and that's what we're going to include when we actually come forward with our full certification program. However, we can work on a baseball-specific type of activity here. We can have him switch grips, work on his changeup grip. This time, let's go into a split stance to work on a little hamstring flexibility. So back up on the back toe, front leg straight. Now he's going to do it out in elbow extension, so we can work that range a little bit differently. He's got his change-up grip. You can see he's doing a little bit of pronation. And I really like to hit that curveball grip in both elbow flexion and extension as well. And there's a lot of things you can do here. Let's go in a lunge stance, show him something a little different. Somebody has weak quadriceps. We can have him go into this lunge stance and flex that knee. Work the quad harder. Now if you look, once again, the band is over the top, so that resists him as he comes into ulnar deviation. So ulnar to radial deviation, great way to start to strengthen it. He's at approximately 90 degrees here. I will encourage everybody to avoid the 70-degree position with supination. As we talked about in our assessment video, that's where the UCL becomes damaged. So he's going to do it in flexion. Can you go into extension for me a couple reps? So where does Chuck need to work? Right here, because this is where he struggles the most. So that flexor carpi ulnaris, big muscle here, forearm muscle, it attaches here and here, same places as the UCL, and stabilizes it. And what I like to do sometimes is actually have what Chuck just demonstrated there as he goes. So he works hard, he's training, once again, forearm, tricep, and everything at once. He's training his quadricep, or if he straightens this leg, he's going to train hamstring flexibility. We have a lot of things we can do with these exercises at the same time, but really our primary goal is right here and right there. And these are some of our favorite forearm exercises for our baseball players. And all you need is a cheap TheraBand, costs a couple bucks in a baseball, which you already have, and you've got a baseball-specific forearm training exercise. But I also like to make sure, especially for my guys that throw a little sink or a little screwball, to start to train that pronator teres and even more distal components of the pronator as well. So now, because I want it to resist him into pronation, I need it medial. So if you look, the band is going to pull harder and it's going to try to supinate him. So now he's here and he's going to try to turn that forearm, turn that forearm, turn that forearm. Good, keep that elbow up. And then let's show him a little addition of valgus. So we've got him here. We're going to have him resisted. He's going to let it turn up and turn down into pronation. Now, if you look, the attachment point's pointing this way. He's got to pull this way. There's added valgus stress to the elbow here. So maybe not something I do initially because it's going to really stress the inside of the elbow, but that's the stress that's going to be encountered, that outward bending stress when he goes on the field. So I like athletes to get accustomed to that, and he's trying to train his pronator teres, his forearm muscle, go, turn that forearm, to try to stabilize against that valgus stress at the same time they pronate, which is exactly what happens at the end of the throw. If you like this video, you got to make sure you hit that thumbs up button. We got this 5-part series. If you haven't checked out the other components, the prognosis, as well as the type of UCL tear. Talked about the manual therapy in part 3, and in part 2 we talked about the assessment components, which are all very important when you think about loading the forearm, loading the elbow through these exercises. And then part 5, we're going into the throw, so you want to subscribe so you don't miss that part, but also keep in mind how we're strengthening it and the assessment component, because those are essential when we go into the throw to think about how the ligament gets loaded dynamically. We'll see you guys in part 5. Great pronator tears.